My cousin had everything on a platter during his childhood. New cars, private school, everything. My cousin had everything handed to him on a silver platter during his childhood. New cars, private school, everything he needed at Thanksgiving dinner. When he found out I had millions of dollars, completely fell apart in front of everyone. My aunt screamed, and my father just sat there in shock. I'm William. I'm 29 years old. If you had asked me 10 years ago where I would be today, I would have laughed, not because I didn't have dreams, but because I was always in the shadow of my cousin Henry. This is the story of how everything changed at one Thanksgiving dinner when my family showed their true colors, and I learned to stand up for myself. We grew up in a small town, the kind where everyone knows each other. My parents were hardworking, my father was an accountant, and my mother was a nurse. We weren't rich, but we never went without. However, I always felt that they expected little from me. They didn't say it, but they showed it by constantly comparing me to Henry, the son of my Aunt Elena. She was a widow, charismatic and manipulative, always managing to make everyone revolve around her. Henry was her pride and joy, the spoiled golden boy of the family. From a young age, Henry had it all. At 16, my aunt gave him a red Mustang that made everyone at school turn their heads. I rode my bike, or walked to the public school. Henry attended a private school, kind where they treat you like a future president. I, on the other hand, dealt with crowded classrooms and old textbooks. I didn't hate Henry. No. At first, we were just cousins, played together as kids. But over the years, he changed. He became arrogant, as if you were better than everyone else, especially me. My aunt didn't help, always bragging about him, even if his achievements were minor. If Henry got AB, it was as if he'd won an award. Me, with my A's, barely got a well done for my father. At family gatherings, everything revolved around Henry. They talked about his plans, his stories, while I was the quiet cousin, the one nobody noticed. My Aunt Elena would say things like, "William is so responsible," but she said it with a tone that made it sound boring. Those words hurt. Though I never admitted it, I wanted them to see me, to recognize that I also had something to offer. At 15, I started working at a grocery store, loading boxes and cleaning. It wasn't glamorous, but it taught me the value of hard work. I saved every dollar, not because I was stingy, because I wanted something more. When I finished high school, Henry went off to an expensive university, paid for by my aunt. I went to a community college, working during the day and studying at night. He would post pictures of lavish parties. I barely slept between shifts and exams. I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I felt envious, not of his things, but of the attention he received, but I didn't let that stop me. I told myself, if you want something, go get it. And I did. With a scholarship, I got into a state university and studied business administration. It wasn't my passion, but I knew it would give me the tools I needed. I started trying out business ideas. I sold things online, did freelance work, some failed, but every mistake taught me something. At 25, I found my path, a platform that connected small businesses with local suppliers. It started small, but in 3 years, it grew to a national level. By the time I was 28, my company was worth $30 million, and I had $10 million in the bank. I didn't spend on luxuries, I invested everything in safe stocks. I wanted to build, not to show off. My family knew nothing about this. I never told them. Not because I wanted to hide it, because they never asked at dinners. They continued to talk about Henry, about his big plans, even though he had dropped out of college and was working in real estate, living off the image my aunt created for him. I was just a cousin who showed up with a bottle of cheap wine and a forced smile. Everything changed at this year's Thanksgiving dinner. There was something different about me that night. For the first time, I wanted to speak up, not to brag, for them to finally see me. The dinner was at my Aunt Elena house with a perfect table, turkey, mashed potatoes, cranberry sauce. She was in her element, telling stories about Henry. My father and mother nodded along as always. Henry, sitting at the head of the table, smiled with that arrogance that got on my nerves. I don't know how the topic came up. I think my mother said something like, "William works with computers, right?" And I, without thinking much, blurted it out. "Yeah, my company is doing well. It's valued at $30 million, and I have about 10 million in the bank." The silence was absolute. Forks stopped midway to their mouths. My Aunt Elena gasped, as if I'd said something impossible. My father looked at me, as if he didn't recognize me. Henry turned pale, then red, and his fork clattered onto his plate with a sharp noise. 10 million, my aunt said, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. How I didn't expect that reaction. I thought there would be surprise, maybe pride. But what I saw on their faces was something else. Envy. Resentment. Henry was the first to speak with a nervous laugh. "That can't be true," he said. "Come on, William. 10 million. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. But what came next was worse. My aunt started asking questions not with curiosity, but with a calculating tone. "And what do you do with so much money? Don't you plan on helping the family?" My father, instead of supporting me, said, "That's a great responsibility, William. You have to be careful." Henry, still pale, muttered something about how things like that don't last. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere was broken. My aunt and Henry started talking about his projects as if my success was an opportunity for them. My mother tried to change the subject, but my aunt insisted Henry is working on something big. You could invest in him, William. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a disguised demand that night. While I was helping with the dishes, I overheard my aunt and my father talking in low voices. I didn't catch everything, but I heard words like trust fund and control. My heart sank. They weren't proud. They were planning how to profit from me. When I got home, I couldn't sleep. I felt a mix of betrayal and rage. For years, they had ignored my efforts, and now that I had something, they wanted to take it away. I sat in my apartment, staring at the wall, trying to process what I had heard. I wanted to think it was a misunderstanding, but the way my aunt and Henry spoke at dinner as if my money was an opportunity for them left me with no doubt. It hurt, but it also ignited something in me. If they thought they could manipulate me, they were mistaken. The next morning, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Elena, with that sweet voice she used when she wanted something. "William, dear. How are you? Last night was such a surprise. We should talk. Don't you think Henry has an incredible project? With your experience, you could help him." She didn't mention my effort. "Only Henry." I hung up saying I was busy. But my head was spinning. Project. Henry hadn't even finished college, and his businesses were all smoke and mirrors. That same day, my father tested me. "Son, we need to talk about your money. It's a lot for you to handle alone, and the family could benefit. Come home this weekend." It wasn't an invitation, it was an order. I stared at the message with a knot in my stomach. My father, who barely asked how I was, now wanted to talk about my money. I didn't reply. The next day, my mother called. "William, don't be selfish," she said. "Don't you see that Henry needs a chance?" Selfish. Me, who had worked since I was 15 while Henry had everything handed to him. The word burned. I decided I needed to know what was going on. I called Marcos, a friend from college, who was now a financial lawyer. I told him about the dinner and the words I'd overheard. "That sounds shady." He said, "Trust fund without your permission is illegal, but they could be trying to pressure you. Let me look into it." I thanked him, and we agreed to meet soon. Meanwhile, Henry started inserting himself into my life in ways I hadn't expected. I received an email from a local bank congratulating me on guaranteeing a loan for a real estate business. The problem was, I hadn't guaranteed anything. Henry's name was on the documents next to mine. As if I were his co-signer, I was furious. Not only were they manipulating me, but Henry was using my name for his scams. I called the bank and made it clear. I had not authorized anything. They promised to investigate, but the seed of distrust had been sown. What else was my cousin plotting? I decided to go to my parents' house that weekend, not because I wanted to confront this. The tension was unbearable. My Aunt Elena was there with Henry, who was smiling as if nothing was wrong. My mother served coffee, trying to lighten the mood, but my father got straight to the point. "William, your aunt and I have spoken. Your money is a blessing, also a responsibility. We were thinking of a family trust so that we are all protected from what I asked," containing my rage. My aunt chimed in with her syrupy tone. "Your young William, money can be overwhelming. Henry has plans. and with your support, could do something great. That's what family does, they help each other. I looked at Henry, who avoided my gaze. What plans, Henry? I said, because I know you use my name on a loan application, without my permission. The silence was heavy. My aunt's face turned red. My father frowned. Henry staggered something about a misunderstanding. But I didn't believe him. There's no misunderstanding, I said. You use my name to apply for money. That's a crime. My aunt stood up, indignant. How dare you accuse Henry? He's just trying to get ahead. And you with all that money won't help him. Help him, I retorted. I've worked since I was 15, while Henry had everything easy. I built my company from scratch. Where were you when I was working double shifts to pay for my studies? My father tried to calm things down. William with family shares? Shares, I said, almost laughing. When did you ever share your support with me? When everything was always about Henry? The argument escalated. My mother tried to mediate, but there was no turning back. I stood up and said, I'm not going to let you manage my money. What I have I earned. I walked out, ignoring my aunt's shouts that night. Marcos called. He had found out that my aunt and father had consulted a lawyer about a trust using an old authorization I had signed for a family matter. They couldn't control my assets without my signature, but it showed their intentions. He also discovered that Henry had tried to use my name on 2 other loan applications, both of which were rejected. My cousin wasn't just an opportunist. He was dangerous. I felt betrayed. For years, I had sought my family's approval, even if I wouldn't admit it. Now I saw that I would never have it, not because I was insufficient, because they just wanted what I had. I hired Marcos as my lawyer, and asked him to shield my assets. I started gathering evidence. The emails from the bank, the messages from my aunt demanding I invest in Henry. A week later, an acquaintance from town told me Henry was going around telling people that I had stolen a business idea from him. It was a ridiculous but dangerous lie. If he kept making up stories, it could damage my reputation. I called David, a journalist friend, and told him everything, asking him not to publish anything yet. I wanted more proof before exposing Henry. While this was happening, my company was growing. We signed a contract with a major supermarket chain which sent our projections soaring. My team was thrilled, but I couldn't fully enjoy it. Every phone call made me fear another trick from my family. I started to distance myself, ignoring their messages. My mother wrote to me, asking me to think things over, but I didn't reply. I couldn't trust them. One night, I received an email from an investor interested in my company. It was a huge opportunity, but also a reminder of what was at stake. If my family kept meddling, they could ruin everything. With Marcos, we prepared a strategy, a letter to Henry demanding he stop using my name and a warning to my aunt and father about the consequences of their actions. I sent the letters, but there was no response. Instead, my aunt started telling relatives that I had become arrogant. Henry continued posting on social media about his next big project. I knew I couldn't just stand by. I had to protect myself, not just for my sake, for everything I had built. What I didn't know was that things were about to get much worse. Few days later, I received a call from an important client of my company. He told me that someone had contacted his team, claiming that I was under investigation for dubious business practices. The client was concerned, and although he assured me he trusted me, the call left me cold. I knew exactly who was behind it. Henry had escalated from using my name for loans to trying to sabotage my reputation. This was no longer just a family betrayal. It was a direct attack on my life. I met with Marcos, my lawyer, that same afternoon. I showed him the bank emails, my aunt's messages, and Henry's social media posts. This is defamation, Marcos said, reviewing the documents. And with the evidence we can sue him. But we can also go further. If you expose this publicly, Henry will have nowhere to hide. The idea of making my cousin's behavior public made me nervous. I didn't want to become the center of a family drama, but I couldn't let him continue using my name for his lies. Meanwhile, my Aunt Elena intensified her campaign. She started calling distant cousins, uncles, even neighbors from town, telling them that I had forgotten about the family and was obsessed with money. Some relatives wrote to me, asking me to make peace and help Henry. Others, more direct, asked to borrow money. It hurt to read those messages. But it also opened my eyes. The family I thought I had never really existed. They only saw me as an opportunity, now that they knew what I was worth. I decided it was time to act with Marcos, his help. We sent a second letter to Henry, this time with a clearer warning. If he didn't stop using my name and spreading lies, we would sue him for defamation and fraud. We also sent a letter to my aunt and father, informing them that any attempt to manipulate my assets would result in legal action. I didn't expect them to apologize, but at least I wanted them to know I wouldn't stand by idly. Henry's response was predictable. He posted a video on social media, talking about how certain people were betraying him and trying to destroy his dream. He didn't mention my name directly, but everyone in town knew who he was talking about. My aunt backed him up, sharing the video with a comment about how families should unite, not divide. My father, to my surprise, said nothing. His silence was almost worse than my aunt's words. That's when I decided to talk to David, journalist friend. I gave him all the evidence, bank emails, the messages, the screenshots of Henry's posts. I asked him to write an article, but not to mention my name directly. I wanted the truth to come out. But without making myself the center of the circus, David understood and promised to work on something discreet, but powerful. While I waited, I focused on my company. Contract with the supermarket chain was finalized, and our projections kept climbing. My team was excited, and although I was too, the shadow of my family still weighed on me. Every time my phone rang, I feared more bad news. But I also felt a new determination. I had built my success from scratch without anyone's help, and I wasn't going to let them take it from me. A few days later, David sent me the draft of the article. It was perfect. It detailed how a local individual had used the name of a successful entrepreneur to obtain fraudulent loans and spread false rumors. Without naming me, it made it clear that Henry was the culprit. I gave him the green light. The article was published in a local newspaper and its digital version. Impact was immediate. Henry's acquaintances stopped following him on social media, and the comments on his posts went from support to criticism. Someone even wrote, "This is the guy who says he's going to be a millionaire but applies for loans in someone else's name." Henry tried to defend himself by posting another video, where he denied everything and claimed it was a conspiracy against him. But the evidence was too solid, and nobody believed him. My aunt, for her part, stopped calling me. But I heard from a cousin that she was furious, saying that I had ruined Henry's life. My father sent me a short text: "Son, this has gone too far." I didn't reply. I was tired of their excuses. With Marcos, we filed a formal lawsuit against Henry for defamation and misuse of my name. I didn't want money. I wanted him to stop. The judge issued a restraining order prohibiting Henry from mentioning my name in any context. We also had to notify the banks that had received his fraudulent applications, ensuring my name was cleared. It was an exhausting but necessary process. While all this was happening, my company continued to grow. The investors who had shown interest before now wanted to meet, and we closed another round of financing that brought the company's valuation to $40 million. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But I also knew I needed to close this chapter with my family, once and for all. I decided to write them a letter, not by email, by hand, as a way to put a final period on it. In it, I explained how I had felt ignored for years, how I worked without their support, and how their reaction to my success showed me who they really were. I didn't send it with anger, but with a sense of calm. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't cutting ties out of revenge, because I needed to protect myself. I never received a response, but I didn't expect one. Over time, things settled down. Henry stopped posting on social media, and I heard he lost his job in real estate after his investments collapsed. My Aunt Elena became more withdrawn, and although she still talked about me to relatives, her stories no longer carried the same weight. My father and mother tried to contact me a couple of times. Their messages were vague, as if they didn't know how to apologize. I decided to keep my distance, not out of resentment, because I needed space to heal. As my company prospered, I began to surround myself with people who valued me for who I was, not for my money. My team at the office became a kind of family, and my friends like Marcos and David reminded me that I wasn't alone. I hosted a Christmas dinner at my apartment, inviting the people who have been with me on this journey. It was a simple night with homemade food and laughter, but for me, it meant everything. For the first time, I felt free from the need to prove anything to my family. Looking back, I realized that the pain of their betrayal forced me to confront something bigger: my own need for their approval. For years I believed I needed them to see me to tell me I was enough, but building my company, overcoming their lives and protecting myself showed me that I didn't need their validation. What I had earned myself. And that was more than enough. My company continues to grow. And although I don't know what the future holds, I know I'm ready to face it. My family will face the consequences of their actions. But I'm no longer looking back. I have found my own path, one that doesn't depend on them, and that is the greatest victory I could ever ask for.